So I'm here with my friend David Hu. He is a good friend that I met in Hawaii. We stayed in sort of a community hostel type of environment for, gosh, I was there for a few years and you were there for many months as well, right? Um,
Uh,
and so
yeah, 4 months.
and so we got to know each other quite a bit there, and I realized that yeah, he's a pretty interesting guy. And so with this podcast, the goal is to kind of just document interesting people that I meet in my life throughout my travels and whatnot. Maybe spread inspiration for other people, cool stories, etc. So David, who right now, he's in Brazil. I'm in Mexico at the time of recording this, and he's been traveling the world for the last how long?
4 years.
Only 4 years. Okay, so um, how long ago? I guess my first question for you, before you started traveling like this, and excuse me because I'm losing my voice here, but you were living in America and working for Google up until what year?
Well,
As an
so
engineer.
I've worked at a bunch of different companies. Google was one of them. Uh, but I've also worked at Khan Academy, which is a education focused nonprofit, um, some other startups. Uh, but I was working full time until 2017. I started working around 2010 as an intern. As an intern, I had about 2 years cumulative work experience. Got to work on some interesting projects. One of them was healthcare.gov, which was uh, the website for Obama's Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, for
Hmm.
Americans to register in health insurance. This website, when it was first launched, uh, basically didn't work. And then they had to get some engineers, fly in some engineers to patch it up, fix it. And I was one of those engineers to help and fix this when I was still a student in college in Canada at the time.
Wow.
That was
Wow. And how many were on that team of engineers working to fix the broken website?
maybe like a few dozen, trying to think, maybe like
Okay.
30, 40. I don't remember the exact number, but it was an elite team of pretty top engineers from Google, various other startups. So yeah, it was really a privilege to be part of that project and had some other
But I
experiences.
imagine that was also very stressful. I mean, probably, up late, some sleepless nights and things like that, trying to
For
fix
sure.
that
I
project.
remember the CTO of the United States at the time, he reported directly to Obama. He would be sleeping literally on the floor of the office during Thanksgiving, when instead of spending time with his family. It got to like that levels of, tension and stress.
Oh my God.
Out of a movie or something.
Wow, yeah. I mean, do you have pictures and things from that time? And I'd love to see some.
Yeah, there's some pictures I can send you.
You're working at all these like tech jobs,
Yeah.
and then you decide to go and travel the world. So it sounds like to most people, it sounds like you threw it all away, right? Like you were doing so well,
Yeah.
and you threw it all away,
Yeah,
right?
something like that. Like in my first work term, I was working at Google, and then my friends or my fellow classmates, they were still looking for a job. Some of them couldn't even find a job, and so I got a really early start to my career. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna do so well. You're gonna, be the next Bill Gates and whatever." Uh, but Yeah, so and then like my life slash career made this like 90-degree turn or 180 degrees, however you want to put it, where I decided to just give it all up, travel the world, live in my car, live in my meditation centers, try out all sorts of um, different things. that is unrelated to um, being successful in the default world.
Hmm.
And yeah, so
So what did your family say when you decide to, you have jobs at Google and things like this?
yeah,
Obviously, like, Google is well known as a very
yeah,
um like great place to work. Like, they give you buffets of just like
sure,
feasts
yeah, yeah, yeah.
for lunch and things like that. If I'm correct, right?
Yeah, and Google is a great place to work. In tech, I would say there are even more prestigious places to work, and
Yeah.
it felt like I got to work at some of those places. But yes, Google is well known for having free food, top chefs, and all this free stuff, you know, all this whatever ping pong tables, foosball, like these slides, all this, oh like on-site haircut, and they do your laundry. They even sharpen your knives, like all sorts of things. Um,
Uh-huh.
Basically, the idea is to keep you uh, a college student. So you never have
Mm.
to be an adult. You never have to um, like f- try to see like what's the point of my life. It's just you're just fed all this prestige and all this free stuff so that you'll just be handcuffed, chained to them.
Yeah,
So
like the golden handcuffs.
you go
Yeah.
to handcuffs and exactly,
Yeah.
yeah,
So what inspired you to go out and travel eventually? Was
yeah.
there like a
So,
book
okay.
you read or a YouTube thing or what was it?
Yeah, okay, so one memory comes to mind when you say that, and I remember walking to the office, and everything was set up so pristinely, so perfectly. Like things were clean, everybody had these smiles, but they weren't really genuine smiles. They were fake smiles. Everyone was pretending to be happy, but really people weren't. People were just were dead in some ways on the inside. And this was
Mm.
at different places I've worked at. Um, and I've been and it didn't jibe with my insides anymore, with who I was internally.
Uh-huh.
Really, what I feel like escalated this experience was a number of things. One, when I graduated, realizing I could work anywhere I wanted in tech, but not having a personal life, not having a social life, not having a meaningful relationship, and feeling like really lopsided as a result.
Uh-huh.
I'm really curious to flesh out these other aspects of life. And
Uh-huh.
then the other part was going to Burning Man a year later and doing psychedelics there. While leading up to it, I've been doing a lot of personal development, therapy, meditation, taking classes on emotional connection, and just putting myself out there in different social contexts, and grew a lot. And so the combination of that at Burning Man on psychedelics, it just blew my heart open, blew my mind open, and I experienced probably one of the most profound experiences of my life.
Hmm.
Getting to
So a
know,
lot of people out there, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, getting to know my true heart, my like who I really am underneath all of these like thoughts and this conditioning, all these voices in my head saying like you need to be more like this, you're not good enough in this way, people, whatever. And I realized who I was.
And one of those voices, at least for me,
Yeah.
is kind of like, there's probably maybe even billions of people in the world who would give anything to be working at like a company like Google, and they would want to live like that and work for their entire life doing that. And like, how do
I was one of
you
those people, Matt. When I
you were one
remember
of those people?
I was in middle school and my mom would be reading to me these newspapers about like all the awesome perks at Google and how they have like a full T-Rex like skeleton in their like and they have a beach volleyball thing in their like front yard and then they get it like and I was like oh my and like the smartest 1% of the world or whatever can get to work at Google and I was like oh my God, this feels like such a pipe dream, but I want to be
Yeah.
one of those people. But I'm not smart
Uh-huh.
enough. So I was one of those people. Yeah, I would, and I made it my goal to work at Google when I was in college. By the time I graduated, but I ended up working there within 8 months.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I totally get it. And when I first worked there as an intern, it was everything I had ever wanted. They literally drove me around in a limo and put me up in a nice hotel and just all this delicious free food and getting to work with all these really intelligent people with the best top of the line systems, best setup. It was heaven, it was paradise for the first few months. And then the second time around, when I went back for a second internship, it became sort of like the doldrums. It was like, oh, okay, I'm just doing what I'm doing, and it became like any ordinary job. You get used to like all of that stuff. You get used to it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like,
it's
so
not
everything that you
special
had
anymore.
always wanted in that pipe dream that you said, it just sort of became normal, and like you became very accustomed to it.
All your friends are working at Google, and whatever. It's like, well, I mean, your colleagues at least, and it's just like, okay, do my thing. There wasn't a sense of like a meaningful thing that I was contributing to,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's
Yeah. So, where was the first place that you traveled?
well, um, well, actually, so when I first quit my job, this was at Khan Academy as a full timer. Um, it I actually lived out of my car for a while, for 6 months, because I'd been so in the prestige grind mill where everybody would be like, "Oh my God, you work at Khan Academy? That's such a cool company," and like having all this attention and all this that I was like, "This isn't real. This doesn't feel like what the average American is living. This is definitely not what the average person in the world is living." So I wanted to just, and I had such a thirst for adventure, for realness, for something that where whether it's pain or pleasure, something where I could feel, instead of like this other world that I knew was fake, that was some sort of artificial bubble. So yeah, I moved into my car for 6 months, drove around the country and back, ended up living in a meditation center for a while too, for a year, um, and so I was still in California for a while. I took a number of different classes on authentic communication, on healing, and on personal growth, and also moved into these different community houses, where they were experimenting with the intersection of technology, of consciousness, and of psychedelics. Um,
Mm.
Super interesting. Some of the experiences and the programs that we got to do as part of these communities.
So, did this first year, living in your car and then in various different spots in California, it sounds like that kind of sparked something inside of
Yeah, and yeah, I remember also there were some times when I volunteered to visit some prisons in California, including
you? Oh,
Pelican Bay, which is the supermax security prison, the highest level, uh, and you would see people who've been locked up in solitary confinement for like 30 years, 40 years, and
oh,
all
in
these.
solitary confinement for 30
Yeah,
years.
yeah, and
Holy
these were,
crap.
the leaders of gangs, uh, and then we would do various. So the point of us being there was to help them with an entrepreneurial idea that they could implement once they're out of the prisons, because it's very hard for them to get jobs. But if they have a business, then there's less hurdles to sustaining themselves. Otherwise, there's a very high recidivism rate, something like
Yeah.
50-60% of people who go out of prison just come back right in because the system isn't supported doesn't
Mm.
support them being able to integrate back into regular society. So, um, so anyway, it was a group of entrepreneurs, investors, and successful professionals who come to help them with refine their pitches and their ideas. And as part of this program, we could really see them, or we had these vulnerability exercises where they would share very personal things, and we got to connect on it, both the volunteers and the people in the prison, um, and these big guys, they would break down crying,
Wow.
and
Wow.
hugging.
I bet that was a
It
wild
was
experience.
it was wild because it was not on any altered state, but I was in the most
Yeah.
altered of states.
Wow.
Seeing this
Wow.
happen in front of me, these big guys hugging each other, these like tough guys, like these Mexicans or whites or and blacks, and where normally uh, they wouldn't mix, but
Mm.
in this environment, like they would, they have their own gangs per race, but it's in this environment they're actually communicating, and so it was really an interesting experience. But experiences like this, experiences where I deliberately uh, as an engineer, it's very at a good company. It's very easy to get into this trap of like, oh, I have status. I talk to these people. I don't talk to these other people. My friends are engineers. My friends are not. I would never talk to the homeless person on the street in San Francisco, where I was working at the time. But I did a challenge. This challenge was 100 days of rejections, and for every day I would do something to get myself rejected. I would
Mm.
um, ask a random person on the street for a hug. I would ask to get coffee for a homeless person. I would just ask to take a selfie with a train conductor. Ask the Harley Davidson owner next to me on the train to meditate with me. All sorts of random things. But through this
What were some
experience
of
too,
the best yeses? What yeses did you get out of that?
yeah, well, some of the examples I mentioned, right, were yeses, which is quite
Yeah.
interesting. Like the Harley Davidson owner, he was talking to me about how his daughter is this like hippie yoga person, and how he would never like he doesn't really believe in any of that stuff. And then at the end of the conversation with him, I got him to meditate with me. So I thought that was
Okay.
pretty cool.
That's awesome.
uh,
That's awesome.
yeah, but anyway, these sorts of experiences where I went from this bubble of being, of like, who do I associate with and who I am, my identity, and really breaking down those identity barriers to really interact with the broader range of all of society. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a
And one
homeless
thing that's
person.
interesting, sorry.
eh, Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, one thing that's interesting about that is that what I've found because I haven't done a 100-day challenge like that, but I've interacted with, the prestigious people back in America, and then like the people who those people would never speak with, especially like in other countries, and during my travels, I've interacted with the ones that they would never speak with, and a lot of the times, my experience is much more interesting with the people who are, I guess, lower on the social hierarchy. Like I
Right.
imagine for you, like you
Yeah.
probably like talking with the homeless guys or talking with the
Yes.
prisoners. You probably had like way more interesting conversations. You probably learned a ton versus talking with the suit and tie people in Silicon Valley.
Well, I wouldn't say that one is more interesting than another, but they're interesting in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would, I wouldn't bias you or against any group. And I would say that, some of the most interesting people I've talked to are the student ties or are the people working in tech.
For
And
sure.
some of the most people I've talked to are the homeless people who have taught me I did this 20-day bike trip, who taught me how to survive in the forest. But it's like really interesting in unexpected ways. Because when I'm working in a certain field, I don't expect to have anything to learn from homeless people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's really just, um, and then I find that in my bubble, there's like a bias, right? It's like the way forward is you know, go from this level to this level to this level, from, individual contributor to a manager. You go from junior engineer to senior engineer to prince to staff to principal, whatever. Um, and then you like buy a house and you get married, or maybe you buy two houses, whatever. Um, and it's like this is just the mindset that everybody's in. It's not questioned. But then when I'm
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
sitting next to this homeless, or I mean, next to this Harley Davidson owner, And he was like, you know what? I think most people, young people, care too much about their careers. And I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
that's interesting. Like, no, none of my friends or parents talk about not caring about your career. It's just a given.
Yeah.
How could you
Yeah.
not? And
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, it just opened my mind to like, as a young person, what could I be spending my time doing? What is the rest of like what is the thing that's really needed in the world? What is
Hmm.
the collective consciousness of the world? Um, and how can I participate? How can I be a part of that versus this like very narrow set of interests um, that I'm
So
everybody
what
else.
do you think are the good things about like that traditional path, like you said, like the people who are very like on a traditional path versus like what good things did you learn from the like Harley Davidson guy you mentioned or things on a less traditional path?
Well, um, it's hard for me to talk about people on the traditional path because I would say the people I've interacted with in tech are in this. Um, it's a it's a small sliver of society
Okay.
where a lot of their thoughts are very like progressive or interest or forward-looking in various ways. For example, a lot of my friends in tech are working on AGI, having artificial
Yeah.
intelligence replace like all of our jobs, uh, and also working on things like life extension, potentially finding the gene that is responsible for aging, changing that, and then now we have a whole new society where people don't die of aging. Think about
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
all sorts of interesting things like this. And the thoughts and perspectives here are really different from most people. Like it's like, for example, one of them is this is the one time in history, in the entire history of civilization, the entire history of humankind, that we have the chance to completely rewrite, completely change um, the course of history, completely change how humankind interacts. It's like bigger than going to the moon, and it's
In terms of like
only
AGI?
yes, definitely. It's
Hmm.
only in the last 30, 40, 50, or 100 years that we've had this opportunity of our entire, whatever, 70,000, 100,000 years of existence. So it's this like tiny, 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 thin sliver of our entire
Yeah.
existence that we have the chance to like radically shift things. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's a very special opportunity. And this idea is that if you have this the skills and the network and the resources to be able to make such a change, then why not? Right? Then it's almost sort of beholden on you to do it because it's like no,
Hmm.
like you are one of a small handful of a giant population of predecessors that have this special opportunity. So that's like one
Hmm.
of the perspectives of a former colleague and friend of mine who decided to start a life extension company. The chances of failure are really high. Most likely he's not going to succeed. But if he does, it's the amount of impact that he has as one man is comparable to, the greatest, the biggest change makers in the world. Um, so that's like one example of these perspectives that I've been in my career, and just because of the outsized impact of tech. Um, there's the yeah, and then some of the perspectives that I've heard from people in other fields. I'd say I've been exploring spirituality, personal growth, and transformation for a long time too, and I've experienced these non-ordinary states of consciousness in which the problems in my life seemingly vanish, seemingly disappear. It isn't that they're gone, but it's that I have an acceptance. I have I don't see them as problems. And from this angle,
So, yeah.
there are more solutions that are possible. Uh, And there's some perspectives from this field, which is to say that uh, instead of trying to change the world, we can change ourselves. And as we do so, we change the world because how we behave, how we react to people changes. And a lot of the problems in the really ingrained, entrenched social issues will naturally change as we change.
So this is a really interesting question. This is like why I like to talk with you, David,
Yeah.
because you mentioned AGI, and then you
Yeah.
mentioned psychedelics, both as
Hmm.
ways of changing the world. So
Yeah.
what do you think is like, like if you could only have one in the world,
Oh, that's
what do you like? Like one becomes illegal. I mean, psychedelics are already illegal, but like let's just say that like you can only take AGI or you can only take psychedelics in the future. Like widespread use of psychedelics or like true AGI.
oh,
What do you think?
AGI on psychedelics. Because, well, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of overlap between these two things that you
Hmm.
highlighted. Um, Psychedelics essentially uh, quiet the default mode network in our brain, this ego, this one that is only interested in self-interested pursuits that actually lead us down a path where we might actually hurt ourselves. Because in reality, we're all interconnected, and as we hurt those around us, we actually that will come back to ourselves. Um, and psychedelics help us expand our perspective to see how we can um, cooperate. And if we all can cooperate, then we'll all be better off. Uh, and in my opinion, AGI, uh, for it to realize uh, its objectives, for it to really increase its intelligence, it also needs to adopt this perspective of
Hmm.
not just intelligence but wisdom, right? Like how uh, if the goal is to create a let's say a starfaring civilization that where we are our reach is much greater um, and our potential, then we need to not destroy ourselves. That is the biggest threat right now is ourselves, right? With
Hmm.
the environment, with nuclear weapons, with all sorts of infighting, right?
Yeah.
And so that AGI needs to figure out how we're going to not self-destruct. And it's very similar to actually the mindset shifts that can come about on psychedelics.
It's interesting.
So,
But there's
yeah,
also the risk that AGI destroys us. Like I've heard really interesting examples of like, um, I'm curious to see what you think on this.
yeah,
But like, if AGI becomes basically its own life form, where there's like just hundreds of these supercomputers just running this like insanely all-knowing life form, essentially, like it could start to like only become self-interested, and like it runs away and like suddenly have chat GPT 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 like within seconds, you know and then like it starts to realize, well, like if we get rid of all the oxygen on Earth, then that will help corrode the computer components less. Therefore, it's best if if it figures out a way to just get rid of all the oxygen on Earth, because then it'll extend the survival of GPT. So what do you like? What do you think about that? About like not
that is
necessarily
like,
just the oxygen example, but like AGI, like
yeah,
kind of being bad for humanity.
that is like one of the biggest problems in our existence right now. AI is an existential threat, um,
Yeah.
especially AI that's not aligned with human interests. Especially if we give the AI a goal. Let's say the goal is, we want to improve the company profits, but this company it makes paper clips, and the AI decides that let's say the goal is pretty narrowly focused, to increase paper clips. And the AI decides that in order to increase paper clips, it's got to turn all human beings into paper clips, and all the human, all,
Exactly.
And so this is a really naive example of a misaligned AI where maybe the initial objective was beneficial, like, oh, we're running out of paper clips, we wanted more. help us do that. And actually, capitalism is sort of like this too. We want more things. We want more profits. But in capitalism's like steady march to increase profits, we're eventually going to turn all the world, our natural resources, all the forests into things that we don't actually need, um, and we'll turn all the human beings, our free time, our creativity into stress for this machine. So it's already a capitalism in some sense is this paperclip maximizer. Um,
Hmm.
but with AI, that can really be accelerated because if you have AI that's really intelligent, it's more intelligent than humans. It can create that's more intelligent than the most intelligent human beings that created it. Then it can create a more intelligent version of itself
Yes.
ad infinitum until we become like ants to it.
Yeah.
Uh, and then who knows what it's gonna do? We have no
Yeah,
idea.
I mean the
Yeah,
famous example, I mean there's a few examples like, you know, monkeys are our ancestors and now we just put them in a zoo. So like maybe one day we will be in some sort of zoo. Humans
yeah,
will just be in a zoo. And also like you mentioned ants, like another kind of like common example is like if there's an anthill and you want to build a house there, you don't care. You bulldoze the anthill. It doesn't matter. So like it's possible that like if GPT-5, for example, becomes like really smart, like smarter than any of the engineers that created it, then
yeah.
instantly it will start making GPT 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and like you'll have GPT like a million
Yeah,
within minutes.
and the scary thing about this too is that it's very hard to contain AGI once it's out there because what it
Yeah.
can do is as long as it has an ability to interact with one human being, it can be really intelligent and manipulate that human in ways that that human doesn't even know that they're being manipulated by, and
Uh-huh.
then be able to eventually and in some sense this is already happening with you might have heard of Sydney, which is Bing's AI, in the ways that it has really actually charmed a lot of people on the internet. Um,
Hmm. I haven't heard
it,
of that, but that's interesting.
yeah, some people think it is AGI already. Some people think that it has an IQ of 250, and the interactions with it are quite eerie in
Hmm.
how almost like a human it is, with its own like desires and darkness. But anyway,
So Sydney is powered by ChatGPT 4, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, this is an existential threat to humanity. Um, a lot of very intelligent people are working on this right now, and in my opinion, we need to take actually the learnings from the best wisdom traditions from
Hmm.
ancient uh, some of these ancient practices from Buddhism, from um, uh, different not just Buddhism but just different spiritual teachings um, that help us not just refine our ability to uh, like actualize our will, but extend our awareness of where we should where we should extend our will towards. Not just the
So
how,
do
which
you
all technology is focused on, is the
uh-huh.
how, but also the why. What are we here for? And so, in my opinion, we need to look for that maximization function, that the set of values that, if we were to maximize it, would encompass the interests of all of humanity, of all of life. Because if I create AI to maximize the interests of Putin or versus of Biden, it's they're going to conflict, um,
Yeah.
and all of life, there's conflicting interests. So, what is that maximization parameter or set of parameters that all of us as humans can agree on? And in my
Hmm.
opinion, it's impossible to define one thing, but in my opinion, there's like it's akin to this very nebulous thing called beauty.
Okay.
we can all agree that we want a more beautiful world. But how does that look like? What are the parameters that feed into that? Um, it's hard to precisely define, but I feel like we have an intuition for it. Uh,
Okay. So what if you were in charge of OpenAI? What would you like direct it to do?
hmm. That's a good question. I would direct it to figure out how to create an aligned AI. I would direct it to figure out how to really to answer the question of what sort of AI we want to create, what sort of
Well,
society we want to have,
and
what
also by
sort
it,
of,
I mean like the AGI. So like, what would
yeah,
you tell GPT-5 to go figure out?
that the question of
Oh,
what should it figure out, what
oh,
should we
okay. That's
create,
yeah, yeah. I see what you mean there. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
right? Because that's the wisdom question, right? We can always, of course, okay, we want to, yeah, we want to solve world hunger, we want to solve cancer, we want to end wars. Yes, great. But who knows if in the process of doing that we create even greater problems. Um, so what is it that we actually want as humanity?
Yeah.
How
So
can
what
we?
do you think the world is gonna look like? Like I don't know. Like there's what they call the singularity,
Yeah,
which is like this point where
right.
GPT basically like GPT-5
Replication.
becomes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,
Yeah,
and like it becomes just this crazy being almost.
yeah.
So what do you think the world looks like? Well, A, like how soon do you think the singularity might happen, and B, like what does the world look like after the singularity?
That's impossible to say. That's like
Because it's a
asking ant.
singularity, exactly. Yeah.
Like, tell me what happens if when you are a single-celled amoeba. Tell me what happens when you evolve into a human being. What do you think you're gonna do? How are you gonna reshape? It has no
Uh
idea.
huh.
That's a,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but one thing I'm curious about is how things will become more interesting. And I feel like what we want in this world is an increase in the interestingness in the world. I feel like that is something we all that life inherently uh, is creative. Life, you look at all the varieties of life that nature has created. If AI can assist in that, in the amplification of um, the creative forms of life, then I believe there is value for the existence of human beings because we are a form of life. We are a unique expression of life. Just like now that we've come to our level of consciousness, we actually want to preserve different forms of life. We want to preserve even the ants, even the different species of them, because they're unique. Um, and I feel like a sufficiently intelligent AI would also see us as a unique form of life that is worth having its own habitat and coexisting alongside them. That's my argument.
Well, I don't have a lot of faith in like life caring about other life because like we just put like every other animal on earth is just in a zoo. Like
Well,
that's our best treatment for them that we've come up with.
well, but if you look at the course of history, we used to enslave animals, and we would not have any second thoughts about that, and we still do in some ways, like zoos. But progressively, we've become more and more conscious. We've become conscious about the impact of animal suffering. And now there's this whole organic movement. And in our past, we've also enslaved each other, enslaved other human beings, and now that's no longer acceptable. And I feel like as we evolve and progress, it will, what now there are zoos, but perhaps in the future we wouldn't. Our zoos will become more humane, or we'll get rid of them altogether.
Mhm.
So it's important not to see where we are right now, but to see the trend, the overall trends.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. And so if you had to like bet, um, like I mean, because I think that this singularity in AGI has the potential to like literally destroy humanity or create like a perfect utopia. I think that like both extremes are possible. But it will maybe be somewhere in the middle. Do you think that like we'll be able to have control of this thing and we will like 30, 40 years from now be much better off because of it?
Huh. It's impossible to say. We're
Yeah.
creating a new life form here.
Yeah.
We're opening Pandora's box. We don't
Do you
know.
have friends in the tech world that you speak with often that are working on these things?
Yeah, I do have friends who are working on these things, and right now there are multiple camps. There's some camps that are just so focused on creating AI for maximization of profits because it's going to
Hmm.
explode, because it's going to blow away every other industry. And then there's also some people who are really focused on, wait, let's not just create this Pandora's box as fast as possible. Let's actually like agree to slow down the work on this because this could easily become nukes if it's in the wrong hands, even more powerful.
Hmm.
So, yeah, um, I don't. It's something we're still wrestling with as
Yeah,
humanity,
for sure.
figuring out how to move
Yeah,
forward.
and like to me, it looks like, using GPT-4, it seems almost like an AGI. I mean, I'm no expert in this. You know more about this than I do, but it seems like quite good at a lot of things. And so, like, AGI could be, I mean, five or less years from now. I'm not in the industry. I don't know, but it seems close. And it seems like humanity as a whole doesn't really understand, like, that this thing could be so close and how big of a deal it is.
Yeah, I would agree that right now we're almost like kids playing with a nuclear bomb, and we're like, oh my God, look,
Yeah.
fun buttons and stuff. Uh, so
Yeah, yeah. Look, it wrote a poem. you know,
yeah,
it did my college essay. But like it's a lot more than that. So it's pretty crazy, pretty interesting.
but yeah, that's about the AI aspects, and I know people, I have friends who can speak a lot more in depth than I can on this topic.
For sure, for sure. No, I mean it's just an interesting thing to
Questions,
talk about.
yeah, about like because you're talking about my travels, and we hadn't really got to the part where I started traveling yet.
Yeah,
But
I know. Well, that's what I love about this. Like, I like to go on tangents and
yeah,
and
totally, that's
just
cool.
have interesting talks. But yeah, for sure. I want to talk more about your travels and also about psychedelics that you mentioned.
Right.
And so since I mean, like, yeah, what order do you think is best in terms of like
What are
your
you
life?
curious about?
What am I curious about? Right now in this moment, I'm most curious about like your psychedelic experiences and like what are some of your most memorable ayahuasca ceremonies or other ceremonies, for example?
Wow, there's so many, too many to mention. The first one that comes to mind is with Bufo, also known as 5-MeO-DMT. Uh, and I received a double dose on my 30th birthday, and it has been the most out of this world experience I've experienced, where it where I saw this infinite infinity. I experienced the infinite lifetimes, the infinite varieties of life, the infinite consciousnesses, all of the stories, the pains, the suffering, the highs, the lows, the everything.
Oh my
Um,
God.
it's impossible to describe it. It's like you are a dot in the sand, and then suddenly, right in the sand, suddenly you see the whole Earth. But beyond that, you see the whole universe, the whole galaxy. But it's the whole universe is infinite. um,
Uh-huh.
and uh,
So you were no longer David at that point.
I saw like what the Buddhists call the reincarnation, the different lifetimes. That as consciousness, as basically awareness, I can't never not exist. I always perceive, because if I'm if I'm if I don't exist, I'm not going to be able to perceive non-existence. But
Yes, yeah. It's so
yeah,
funny. I've had a very similar ayahuasca, so actually with
yeah,
you. the ayahuasca ceremony that we had together.
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience where, like, you know, it seems like the default of the universe should be that nothing exists at all. There should be just a big void and there should be nothing. But in order for nothing to exist, there has to be something in order for nothing to be a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. The idea of nothing has to be perceived by something. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've had, I guess it sounds like a similar experience.
Something like that. Uh, but really just a vast zooming out. When normally we're sort of stuck, we're zoomed into our personal dramas and problems. How do I pay
Yeah.
my bills? How do I, what if this person triggered me? Blah, blah. Um, and that contrast, which is both true at the same time. Yes, I do need to pay my bills as an earthly,
Yeah.
physical being, and at the same time, I am part of this infinite dance of creation of consciousness, which is vast beyond my imagination. So, like,
So,
how do I figure out what do I do in the next second, in the next minute,
yeah.
from this perspective, right? And
Yeah. So in the Bufo experience that you mentioned, I mean, are you able to describe, I know it can be very hard, but like did you visually see like literally a wheel of like
uh,
reincarnation type of
I
thing
didn't
or like
see it, but I experienced it.
uh yeah. So I mean, did you experience the world like as a bird and like and an ant at the same time and like just everything perceiving everything all at once?
It's hard to describe that. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
guess if you watch the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's some sort of experience of that where it's not presented to you like a movie screen, but it's just this knowing that
Hmm.
you then later put pictures around. Uh,
Yeah. So I want to hear about a few more of your psychedelic experiences, and then
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to talk about the
yeah.
integration of
So,
those in
so
life, like after because
so these
the
experiences
stories.
are vastly different, right? And like
Yeah.
this is one type. Another type that actually comes to mind a lot are my parents. Um, so feeling love from my parents, right? As uh, an Asian man, my parents they also had a very traditional mindset in some ways, and they wanted me to be happy, to be successful, to be healthy, and they did the best they could, and with what they knew. And in that process, maybe they didn't love me in the way that I wanted to be loved, um, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they harmed me in certain ways that they didn't mean to. And as a result, I've developed certain, as everyone does, certain triggers or certain resentments or certain expectations of my parents. Oh, if only my parents could be more like this or like that. Um, but in these ceremonies, I've come to really see how much, first of all, my parents love me, how much they unconditionally want to be there for me, do whatever they can. And there's no other being in the world like that, except for my parents. And how, because of their limited resources, knowledge, they suffer themselves. And they are the way they are because of their upbringings and the worlds that they were in. And so that way, I can come to really love and appreciate and accept my parents for who they are, while at the same time understanding that they also, because of my upbringing, created a lot of psychological issues that I'm wrestling with in my healing journey.
Hmm.
Um,
Why do you think that love is such a common theme with psychedelics?
oh, that's a beautiful question. And the first thing that comes to mind is that uh, psychedelics floods our brain with connections. And all these different nodes that otherwise wouldn't be talking to each other get to talk to each other. And as a result, we see a larger perspective. And when we see a larger perspective, we see how everything makes sense. Um, and you're almost like asking me what is the definition of love here. And love, in some sense, it is in my definition, it is an embrace, it is an acceptance of all things as they are.
But yeah, but
In
would you
order
say
for us
it's
to
just
do
like
that,
oxytocin
in order for us to
neurons in
do
your?
that, we need
Go ahead.
to perceive the truth. We need to perceive how things are the way they are. And when we can understand things the way they are, then that allows us to be at peace with them, even if, and at the same time allows us to change things if we wanted to. But without this thought that it should be something a different way, because we see how and why things are the way they are.
So do you think it's just like you mentioned neural pathways, and so do you think it's just oxytocin and neural pathways in your brain, or do you think that the love that you experience with psychedelics is something beyond us in a sense, like something beyond just oxytocin
Well, I mean,
or dopamine or
serotonin,
serotonin or whatever?
dopamine, whatever, these neurotransmitters, they do help facilitate some of these connections and insights. Um, but yeah, in my opinion, it's the explanations. There's always different angles to it. There is a biochemical explanation for the origins of various uh, issues, physical ailments. There's also a psychological explanation. There's also a social uh, dynamic explanation. There's different angles. There's a spiritual lens, um, and there definitely is a biochemical explanation for the increase in the feelings of love. There also is uh, a topological explanation, a mathematical, a way of, as I've been attempting to impart, this expanded understanding. Um, we feel love for each other when we understand each other. When we understand, oh, so you were going through such a difficult experience, such pain that you acted out in this way because you were scared that if you didn't, you would die. It reminded you of this instance. Well, of course you did, and now even though your actions hurt me, I can understand you and love you, um, regardless. Uh, while not discounting your actions, for example, the impact of your actions. Um, so it's from this increased understanding, this increased perspective, that we gain true empathy from which love arises.
Hmm. I've also said after my psychedelic experiences that it feels like love is like the fabric of the universe, like the fabric of everything. Does that resonate?
If you define love as that which originates all things, all life, then yes, it is the fabric of everything. It is the trees, the sea, the waves of the sea. It is the flying birds. It is the this water bottle. It is the technology that allows us to communicate. It is even the pain that I experience. It is the feelings of disconnection. It is so in this metaphysical abs- abstract sense, love is the fabric of all reality, of all life, if we can
Yeah,
perceive it as such.
yeah, that's how I would see it. How many times have you done ayahuasca now?
About 50
If you had to guess,
ceremonies.
about 50. And so when you say that to some people, I'm sure that you get like some. I mean, it's a controversial idea, right? Like doing ayahuasca 50 times, people must say, "Oh my God, you must be so screwed up that you have to take ayahuasca 50 times, right? Like you must be dealing with some serious psychological
Well,
issues or something."
I know people in the jungle.
Well, in the jungle, no, 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 they're
Yeah,
not gonna say that. They're not
yeah,
gonna say that. But in the U.S., people might see this as like a
sure,
very like they don't understand why would you do
sure,
ayahuasca 50 times.
sure. Well, so I mean, I was with the tribes in the Amazon jungle, and it's a way of life for them. The
Yeah,
kids, when they're 7 years old, they start drinking ayahuasca
yeah,
with their
uh huh,
families. They've by the time that they're middle age or older, they've probably drank thousands of times, thousands of ceremonies.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so it's to us in America, it might feel like, oh, this is like a thing you do if you're really meeting some crisis, but to other traditions and other cultures, it is like going to the church, the Sunday church. It's like,
Uh-huh.
going out to see the movies. It's a regular part of their life.
Yeah, I
It-
was shocked to
it's
see
the heart.
like I think a 3-year-old kid at an ayahuasca ceremony in Brazil.
Oh wow.
Like that's just unheard of in the
Yeah.
U.S.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was just everybody like at that ceremony. Was all just kind of part of it. Like everybody was just very loving and like they were laughing about the fact that I'm just this gringo who doesn't understand that ayahuasca tradition, and how like from our perspective, it would be so dangerous to give a child ayahuasca, but from in their perspective, it's just medicine.
And I want to say that it's both and. It is very dangerous to give ayahuasca to people in from the Western um, system, and it. But the reason that they would give it to their 5-year-old, their 3-year-old kids even, is because they're in a completely different context that supports that. They're living connected to nature where they have abundant social connection. Now, there's a default tribe. There isn't this like win lose, individualist, eat or be eaten capitalist mindset. There isn't the stress, the overwork. There is like as soon as I woke up in the jungle, on the first morning, I felt like a new person. I felt like I belonged to all of life. I had some big problems in my life before this. And then the morning that I woke up, I felt like it all disappeared. And this was without any medicine. This was just being at the village in the Amazon with the people, with the way that they are, with the abundance of raw life in the jungle.
Yeah.
So in that context, the medicine is safe and supportive. But in a context in which you are locked into this system and feeling stressed and overburdened and have few social connections and don't and haven't you know talked to someone meaningfully about and had that connection, and then you get them to do ayahuasca, the experience might be so out of context for them that they go back into their own life. They can't make sense of it anymore, and they're unable to function in their own life. So it's absolutely both and.
So how long did you live in the jungle?
That was just a week, but it was a very beautiful week, in a week where I experienced profound love and connection, human love and connection, the sense of belonging, belonging to a tribe, belonging to humanity, belonging to the earth. Things that I cannot tell you in 5 million words what the experience is like. It has to be felt.
Yeah. Did any part of you think of just leaving it all behind and living there?
Oh, totally, of course. I'm
Yeah.
like, why
Yeah.
am I leaving the jungle? This is paradise, except
Yeah.
for all the
Uh-huh.
mosquitoes.
Uh-huh.
Constantly. Ugh. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
I 100% understand that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But why did you leave it? Because like also like I have the option to go just live in the
My
jungle
soul
and
isn't there. It's not my soul's calling to just leave everything I knew and be in the jungle, in the forest.
yeah.
There's my soul's calling is to be a bridge between these different civilizations, different cultures, different ways of being, different thinkings. I have friends who are like on the cutting edge of tech, and I have friends who are on the cutting edge of spirituality, and friends who are artists, friends who are homeless, who are wealthy but depressed. All these different who from China, from the U.S. And for me, my soul is to be this nexus point, to be this uh, node that connects these seemingly disparate cultures, ways of thinking, philosophies. Because really, as Earth, as humanity, we are all connected, and we all need each other in different ways. And we all have a more delicious buffet with different items on the menu, with greater variety than we could with just one. Um, and that's what I'm here to support, the co-creation of
Uh-huh.
this flourishing of biodiversity, of interestingness, for life on Earth and in all the universe.